Big city residents, what's the craziest thing you've seen through someone's house or car windows? I once saw a person in full Spider-Man costume just watching TV in their apartment, mask and all, like all night long. This continued each night for all 3 nights I was in the city. It made me believe that Spider-Man is real, but that he doesn't really have much to do besides watch TV. Story 2. I lived in a big city and made friends with a few guys who lived across the alley from me. They were out drinking on the deck one night when I got home, and they invited me over. So we're drinking, and I need to take a piss. Walk back to the bathroom and glance out the window to see a fire on a deck. Then I realize it's my deck that is on fire. Barge in on my roommate, who is asleep at this point. Dude put his cigarette out into a cardboard box. It caught fire, burned through our deck, and then onto the neighbors below. Just idiot. Commenter. So I grew up in a tiny town in South Alabama. The nearest town was about 15 miles away down some back road. Well, some friends and I were driving home from the bigger town at around midnight. On the way back, we passed this historic marker 1,500 feet sign that had been there forever. I asked my friends if they knew what that was about, which they didn't, and we decided to pull into this little dirt strip off the road to find out what it was. So here it becomes important to know that my truck at the time had really bright off-road lights and a PA loudspeaker system because high school. And I had important things to broadcast, apparently. Well, we pull into the dirt strip, and right in front of us is a little Honda Civic. My brights and off-road lights are on and just illuminate the interior of the car in front of us. Immediately, through the window, we see 2 figures sit up and we start screaming like apes because high school. Without thinking, I picked up the PA microphone and shout, "This is the police! Out of the car with your hands up!" Immediately, the back passenger door opens and this thick, middle-aged woman gets out with her hands up wearing jean shorts, and only jean shorts. Facing my truck, saggy boobs lit up by the light of heaven, hands on head. I yelled again to get out of the car, and out of the other side comes this wiry, skinny, middle-aged guy yanking up his blue jeans. He put her bra on the trunk of the car and put his hands on his head as well. At this point, it was no longer funny for some reason, because we thought they would kill us if they knew what was really going on. So I yelled, "Don't move, we're going for backup," and we drove 90 miles per hour back to town. Story 3. I live in downtown Toronto, and I've seen 2 people having sex out of a window. As in, the dude was inside. The girl's front half was out the window, and they were going at it. It was pretty ducking funny. Commenter. I was looking through binoculars and saw someone smoking on their balcony. Imagine my surprise when he pulled out his own binoculars and looked in my direction. One day, my old man friend has a sailboat, and this one time he tells me he was wanted to check something out on shore but couldn't find the binoculars, so grabbed his rifle that has a scope on it. He didn't think anyone was around, but he's scanning the shore and comes across a guy looking out with binoculars. Eyes meet, and the guy flips. Story 4. Not exactly windows, but there is a guy who sunbathes across from our office. 20-something stories up on his porch, in the nude. Every now and then in the summer, the call will go out, "Naked guy is out again." We will all take a quick look to confirm, yep, he still doesn't know we can see him. The office has tinted windows. From outside, they look opaque. Commenter. I saw a dude had a full-on sex doll dressed up in his passenger seat. Sunglasses, dress, and even a hat. I couldn't even tell it was fake until I asked for their order. Coworker and I looked at each other simultaneously, and we both said, "Was that a sex doll?" This is in a wealthy area of my city as well, so it was definitely a first. Story 5. Not even through the window, but when I was at Penn State, I saw a couple having sex on the balcony at about 3 a.m. or so. That probably doesn't count, though, because college. In Denver, across from where I work, is an apartment building. It is well known throughout my office that there is a man 1 floor down that spends roughly 4 hours every day playing Destiny 2 while in his underwear. Recently saw him playing Sekiro naked, and people were more interested in his game change than they were in his lack of whitey-tighties. He didn't seem to enjoy it much because he was back on Destiny within the hour, according to my coworker. Commenter. I teach English privately, and I currently spend every Monday morning teaching a very nice, polite German Lutheran pastor in her flat. Opposite is a university halls of residence, which seems to be girls only. Girls who are unaware that I can see straight into their rooms as they get dressed in the mornings if they don't close their curtains. The nice, elderly pastor sits with her back to the window, and I often find it extraordinarily hard to concentrate, given all the nudity going on over her shoulder. Last week was a new record. 3 completely naked girls in different rooms, one of whom was applying some sort of body cream to her remarkably large breasts. I keep looking for the prank hidden cameras on me. Story 6. Not me, but a guy I work for. I work for a company that takes pictures of homes for banks for mortgage purposes. These include vacant homes, some of them foreclosures. For those that might not realize, foreclosed homes usually contain tons of personal items like clothes, toys, and family photos. Anyway, this guy is inspecting the outside of a foreclosure to make sure it's secure before going inside, and he saw someone staring at him from the inside. He was startled, but looked closer, and saw it was just a cardboard standee of Justin Bieber. When he looked in the window, he saw a life-size doll bent over the bed with her underwear pulled down around her ankles. The cutout of Justin Bieber was placed behind it, staring out the window. Story 7. Saw a crazy guy yelling at Youp's truck, accusing it of being a Decepticon, telling it to show itself and transform. He was literally punching and kicking it. It was 9 a.m. Commenter. These two ladies with tons of tattoos and cigarettes came through, got their two McChickens, and as they were pulling away, I saw there were balloons just crammed into the entire back half of the car, just filled to the brim with balloons. Another time I was helping these two teen boys when I heard a quack from the back seat. "That's the duck," one of them told me, followed by a honk from the back. "And that's the goose." It's worth noting that they had just left a football game and come straight to the drive-thru, so Lord only knows where the duck and goose were before that. I can't believe I forgot to mention the drunk girl in the back seat who leaned out to show me her dolphin temporary tattoo, mimicked a dolphin to tell me it was a dolphin, and showed me photo booth pics of her and her bestie. Story 8. I used to live in an apartment building in the East Village in New York. I was on the back of the building, which faced two other buildings, essentially forming a square behind my building. We used to call this space the shaft. Across the shaft from me, there was a girl around my age at the time, 20-something, who would never wear clothes. And she kept her curtains open all the time. I'd wake up and look out the window facing the shaft and see her cooking an omelet, fully naked. Sometimes before bed, she'd do stretches in her room, naked. In the morning, she'd get dressed for work with the blinds fully open. I swear I saw her boobs more frequently than my girlfriend's. One night I came back from the bars and looked across the shaft and saw that she wasn't alone. This was weird because despite her nakedness, I rarely saw her with anyone else. She didn't have a boyfriend or anything. She was in her room with 3 other people, 2 guys and a girl, and they were all naked too. They weren't having sex or anything, but they were all kind of in a pile on the bed, naked together. I still wonder what her deal was. Was she a nudist or something? In any case, that's the weirdest thing I've seen through someone else's windows. Story 9. Not even super high density. Neighbor behind me in new build homes. Backyards are small, so his back windows are about 20 yards from mine. My house was finished first. I watched theirs be built, met them as they would visit, talked to them and learned. Super religious couple who were engaged, they get the house on X day, but won't be married till the weekend after. So they won't take possession till they are man and wife. That's really all you need to know where I'm going with this. Oh, and I guess you should know. They never seem to understand the reason to get curtains. I swear I saw them have sex. Try do it, learn how to do sex, fail at ducking, occasionally have sex right, and one time do it over the course of their first 2 months. I mainly thought it was funny and just ignored it. One time was drunk with the wife and we just watched from the porch. Wasn't till my daughter asked, "What are they doing?" when we were all out in the backyard that I decided to take action. It was Christmas. I gave them some curtains. Commente. I wish I would have seen this earlier, but anyways, here it goes. When I was 11 years old, me and my friends were playing around our complex building. By then, I just immigrated to Canada, so it was a place where a lot of people would come right after immigration, and also a lot of other people on welfare. Anyways, this really good-looking woman in her mid-20s lived on the first floor. She was looking at us play, and the curtains were behind her. We didn't mind, we just thought she was bored. Then she starts to get squished to the window, and it looks like someone was behind her. Well, it was her BF who was doing her from the back. All of the kids were witnessing the act, so we decided to throw small rocks at the window. Then we got chased by the girl's boyfriend, who happened to be in boxers. Story 10. When I was in college, our dorms were basically high-rise apartments. One night, I was looking out the window, contemplating life, when I saw a man and woman having sex in a building across the street. Like, perfect view of everything. Their bed was directly in front of the window. I called my roommates over, and we kind of just watched for a minute. Then we opened our window and started cheering them on. The guy glanced over, grinned, and kept going. We were basically watching live adult film. Story 11. This kid was spinning the crap out of himself. I was smoking on a balcony with some friends when we saw something moving in someone's window. It was someone's living room, and some kid, maybe 4 years old, had his arms out airplane style. He was spinning around the room so hard. He kept popping in and out of view and genuinely lasted longer than anyone expected. I don't know how, but he must have been going for a full 5 minutes, bouncing off his couch every so often. By the end, we were cheering him on. Commenter. This story is more sad than anything else. If I leave my house to go a few friends' places and general meetups with others, there is one street I always take. There on the corner of a block is a window that every time I pass it, I see a boy sitting in his chair playing games. I would usually see him on Friday, Saturday. At first he was like 13, 14, so nothing quite unusual. As the time passed, I saw him get older. Also, he was always eating. He always had a bowl of something on his lap. So as he grew up, he also got fatter. When he got like 16-ish, the age you start to go out where I am from, he was still there. Every time I walked by him, he was playing games by himself. I've always hoped that I might not see him there. But to this day, Tilda, about 5 years now, he always sits there. Story 12, sort of the reverse for me. Miso can't keep her clothes on, and she doesn't care about the blinds, completely assured no one is looking. Till one day, our neighbor's blinds fell down. There he was, pen in hand, red as a beet, and staring right at us. Commenter? Was at my friend's place when I was about 12 or 13, and we walked over to her friend's house that was around the corner. This friend of hers had the top level of the house to herself with a bedroom and lounge, etc. She suddenly says, "Hey, want to see something weird?" Of course I said yes. And she explained that every night the next-door neighbor paints in his house completely naked with the curtains open. So we scuttled over to the curtain and peeked through, and just as she said, a 50-something-year-old man was painting in his house with his curtain completely open. He was stark naked. He then looked at us and smiled. Shudders. Story 13. This wasn't exactly right up close, but more like the other side of the apartment block I stay at. Plus, the windows were always closed, but the room of the apartment I looked in was always lit so I could see silhouettes. So anyway, I often see this lady, which I could tell by the, well, boobs and flowing hair. She often did gymnastics, stretching and jumping jacks at night. One day, feeling incredibly bored, I decided to pay attention to her routine. She's doing jumping jacks, now moving on to squats. And then she actually took her top off. I got incredibly confused. And eventually, a second head came into view, pretty much mounting the lady. And yeah, the lady was having sex the whole time. Commenter, the replies in this thread reminded me of a truism I heard once that I think checks out. If you stand naked outside your front door and your neighbors can't see you, that's rural. If you stand naked outside your front door and your neighbors call the cops, that's suburban. If you stand naked outside your front door and your neighbors ignore you, that's urban. Story 14. In Toronto, I rented the top floor of a house. The house behind us was set back from the street, and the houses on either side were almost in front of it, so you could barely see it from the street. They had planted tall bushes and tress, so you couldn't see the hidden house. But we could, from our fire escape balcony. We almost never saw who lived there. I was having a dart up on the fire escape one morning, and I see their back door open up and a guy in his early to mid-40s come out in a bathrobe. He lights a dart as well. We give each other a little open palm wave and nod. A minute later, a black woman comes out in a bathrobe, looking to be naked underneath, and she takes off his cigarette. Then another woman, a white woman, comes out, also in a bathrobe, and admonishes the first two for smoking. The guy puts it out, and they all go back inside. A couple of months later, I noticed the guy, the 2 women and 4 kids at the local park. 2 white kids, 2 mixed ethnicity kids, all around the same age. That dude was living large on the down low. Story 15. Right after college, I lived in a communal housing situation outside of NYC. We all had our own bedrooms, living areas, but shared a cooking space. About 15, 20 people lived there at any given time, depending on who was sleeping with what. Most of us were in our 20s, give or take a few strange ducks. One morning, about 3 or 4 a.m., I wake up to the sound of running, loud running, so I crawl out of bed and look into the hall. Next thing I know, there are 5 guys sprinting down the hall in their boxers, socks, and high-freaking heels. Not just little kitten heels, full-blown stripper heels that I couldn't walk in. Apparently, one of the guys had found an assload of cessports in a spare closet in their size, and completely sober, I'm told, decided to practice relays with some of his neighbors. Personally, I just closed my door and locked it behind me. That was a strange few year. Commenter, not really through a window, but from another room. Freshman year at college in NYC, just got back from a trip back home to Texas, and had stocked up on a carton of cigarettes. A friend of mine, we'll call Bill, was low on cash and desperate for a pack of smokes. I jokingly mentioned that I would give him a pack of smokes, but he would have to do whatever I asked. He rushed to accept and was hoping it would be something sexual. He was gay, I am straight, and he always wanted his crack at it. But I said he would need to banana slap a mutual roommate of ours, Nick, who was in the other room. Almost on cue, Nick stood up, walked by our room in the community room, and went to the restroom. Bill jumped up and ripped off his clothes like he was checking in versus the Knicks, and was standing next to the bathroom door on a chair completely naked, tugging away to get some girth, I suppose. Naturally, everyone in the room jumps up and is standing in the living room watching Bill get away. Nick opens the door, says like a douche, "What's the big deal?" Then promptly gets slapped in the face with a pen. A very well-deserved pack of cigarettes. Story 16. Hot Naked Asian, we called her. Tried not to look, which wasn't too difficult as she was a floor up, but with a raised kitchen and quite tall herself. Then one day I came into my room and my lesbian friend was looking sheepish. I knew exactly what she'd done. She'd been ogling and had gotten caught in the act. Hannah shut her blinds from then on. Commentaire. One night during my first winter at what is now Mid-Sweden University, the insanely hot girl next door came out of the shower and started to brush her hair. The towel she was wearing dropped to the floor, and she kept brushing her hair. She squeezed her boobs, oh, those perfect boobs, and played with them in front of her mirror, clearly watching how they would look if they were perkier or droopier. It didn't seem to occur to her that when it's dark outside and you have all your lights on inside, you can't see out, but everyone around can see inside, and I liked what I saw. That was a good day. Story 17. Was staying over at a friend's place in Edinburgh, was on the pull-out sofa. They didn't have curtains in the front room, just blinds, and a balcony beyond that. The railing was all glass. The blinds didn't come down all the way, so I could look out to the flats across the way from where I was laying. Watched a couple have a roaring argument, and then saw him decker. Woke up my friend and called the police. I had to get on a train in just a few hours, so they said I should go back to sleep and they'd keep watch on the couple flat until the police came. Commenter. I was an unapologetic band kid in high school, and I was also that kind of high schooler who Ritalin prescriptions were made for but never applied. The world was just a stage for my natural and often obnoxious sugar rush. I say this because I feel like I have to somehow rationalize why I was waving at every car and truck our charter bus passed on the highway to Indianapolis. But there's no defending it. Is there even such thing as rational thought at 15? We were about 4 hours into the trip, and I remember telling the person sitting next to me that 74 and 4/5 was the number of waves that had been returned. 4/5 because 4 people had only waved a single finger. Har har. I'm glad that most of those years went undocumented, but we still had about an hour to go, and I was intent on breaking 100 by the time we got to Indy. And I might have too, if it wasn't for the strangest thing I'd ever seen through someone's window. A blue Peterbilt was passing us on the right side. I can't remember what the company name was, but it was fairly common. There weren't many features on it worth remembering, because what struck me about it later was how mundane it looked, minus its special cargo, of course. The trucker behind the wheel wore aviators that was framed by hair that was mostly gray at this point. Again, par for the course, and I started pumping my arm. Humor me, buddy. There's not much else to see in Indiana, and I want to make the count 75 and 4/5 S. And he did. A grin appeared beneath the mustache, and the truck driver returned my wave with all my enthusiasm and then some. In fact, it was the best response I'd gotten all day. And then the curtain leading to the sleeper moved. It was so unexpected that I couldn't process what I was seeing at first, continuing my wave with all the enthusiasm of a pepped-up chihuahua, but my manic grin slowly dissolving into confusion. A naked man, a bit older than the truck driver, emerged from the curtain behind him. My wave slowed to a stop, but not before naked co-pilot caught a glimpse of the idiot in the charter bus. The trucker looked over his shoulder and back at me. He started guffawing, as did his buddy. All of a sudden, the world wasn't performing according to my script anymore. I'd just been outdone at my own game, and with the home field advantage, the embarrassment, the crippling feeling of not understanding what just happened. I sank into my seat, waiting for the truck to pass, waiting to reach Indy, waiting for old age to take from me the memory that a couple old dudes had just burned into my forebrain. That last hour was an eternity. 76 and 4/5 waves. Story 18. Lived in this one complex growing up kind of place where we were Section 8 housing, but right across the street were high-end apartments, and I think condos. I could see into the kitchen of a bit of a foodie. This was 88, 89, so that term didn't exist yet. I was at the time learning to cook myself, so this was like a live cooking show every night. Then there was what I know was a mock turtle soup recipe. But at the time, it was like I was watching someone just do obscene things to a few calf heads. Commenter? One Christmas when I was like 8 or 9, my dad and I were walking around looking at Christmas lights in the neighborhood with our next-door neighbor. After a while, I got tired, so my dad put me up on his shoulders. As we're walking along, I have a pretty good vantage into this one house where the owners are having a Christmas party. They had all gone outside, but they left the candelabra burning in the dining room, and it had burned down far enough to catch some surrounding flowers or something on fire. The entire table had caught a flame, which I saw from my vantage point on my dad's shoulders. I was like, their table is on fire. So our neighbor, kind of creepy dude actually, went up and looked into the window, is like crap, and runs around to the house's backyard to tell the owners their house was on fire. Story 19. My wife once saw our smoking hot blonde neighbor getting dressed in front of her apartment window. Full nudity. She told me to go take a look, but I was too late. Never did get to see those boobs. Story 20. An incredibly hot woman sunbathing topless on a rooftop in the middle of the day. But this roof wasn't taller than its adjacent buildings. Oh no. This was like a 10-story building surrounded on all 4 sides by massive high-rises. All told, she was flashing them out to maybe 50 floors worth of office drones, many of whom I'm sure were pressed to the window glass. She probably reduced nationwide GDP for the day by at least a cool million. Story 21. Worked across from a luxury hotel in NYC. Used to see a dominatrix who took all her clients there. One night things got really weird, still scared for life because of it. Worked at an agency in NYC that was right next to the Mondrian Hotel in Soho. And we could see into essentially all the windows. We worked in this location for about 3 years, so we had a front row for quite a while. Generally, there wasn't anything interesting going on. My friend refereed to it as flipping channels on a TV. You were looking for something to watch, but nothing was ever on. We'd get the typical people getting ready to go out, walking around naked, sex, with Missionary Jack hammering for 3 minutes being the most popular, and the occasional naked dancing. Nothing too crazy. And most days when we left at 8, we didn't see much, but your occasional naked walk from the shower. But then we had crazy deadline days where we would stay till midnight or later, and that's when we saw the dominatrix. She must have been using the hotel to meet her clients, but every time it started the same way. She would come in, get ready by stripping into a latex bondage outfit and throwing a trench coat over it while she waited for her client to arrive. Once he arrived, it was the typical bondage stuff like being tied up, spanking, etc. Although some of these Johns were interested in things like wax, which was a little more risque. Since this was her place of business, and we were there for years, it became known that at a certain time it was either going to be a show or we'd have to wait a week. Weirdest night, though, had to be when she had a couple as her client. Basically, the wife just watched as she humiliated him. He licked her boots. She dog-walked him. Nothing too crazy. Just now there was a viewing partner. Except about halfway through, the wife decided to crap on his chest and smear it on his face while the dominatrix was standing on his balls. I imagine he enjoyed himself, but we all recoiled in horror at the immediate aftermath. Story 22. Not that crazy, but my living room window faces directly at my neighbor's living room window. Yesterday, they had their parents over and were playing cards. The dad was sitting on a yoga ball and busted ass right when I happened to glance over, so I saw the whole thing. Got a good chuckle out of that. Story 23. Before our firm relocated our offices, we officed in one of the Dallas Sky Scars downtown. During the day, you really can't see through the windows of the other buildings, but at night, we could make out what people were reading on their computers. To a degree, we circulated an office-wide memo warning people to close their blinds at night because we handle some pretty sensitive cases. One night I was working late and go to close my blinds, and I look out across the way and I see a dude sitting at his desk, doing himself good to bondage adult film. I don't judge, to each their own, but yeah, fair warning to all my Sky Scar friends. We can see your computers. Story 24. I was staying at my father-in-law's condo during a vacation with my wife. There's this annoying middle-aged guy that loves to talk to anyone who comes down to the pool. So we were at the pool talking to him, and he pulls out this big toy gun. We're like, what's that for? And he explained that it shot out salt, and he used it to kill flies. That's pretty cool, I admit. We let him shoot it at us to feel how much force it had, and it wasn't much at all. But I imagine those little grains of salt shred bug wings. Anyway, he eventually went back inside, and so did we. Then we came back out later in the night to BBQ. He was in his home and walking around naked. Okay, no biggie. Just a naked, chubby, middle-aged guy. Not the worst thing I've seen in my life. What made this crap weird is that he walked up to one of his end tables, played with his junk for a second, then reached down and grabbed the salt gun, and proceeded to shoot himself in the twig and berries with it for like 2 minutes non-stop, then headed back into the parts of the house that weren't visible. Story 25. This is a great question, and something that I have an answer for. I grew up in an apartment in downtown Chicago, and there was one apartment whose window lined up perfectly with ours. It was occupied by a younger couple in their mid-20s who I never met in person. I never saw them on the street or at the grocery store. I only ever saw them through the window. One day I was looking through the window, and I saw the couple having sex. I was young and didn't understand that it was wrong to continue observing, so I stayed in the window. The guy saw it, made eye contact with me, and stood up and went into the closet. I continued watching. His hand reached out of the closet holding a Mitt Romney mask, which the woman promptly grabbed and put on her face. The guy emerged from the closet, also wearing a Mitt Romney mask. At the time, I didn't even know who Mitt Romney was. This was before the 2012 election, so I don't even know how or why they had masks of the governor of Massachusetts. It wasn't until 2012 that I realized in hindsight that they were wearing Mitt Romney masks. At this point, I was terrified that they might be trying to hide their identities while they murdered me or something like that. But no. They just finished having sex while wearing the Mitt Romney masks. They didn't even close the window, they just finished having sex. I never saw them again. That apartment was replaced by a couple who liked to piss on each other. Story 26. I had a neighbor across the laneway, but a floor down that was a smug. Tennis, golf, drove a Saab, real wanna be classy but mega pompous. He and his ridiculously mega hot girlfriend were always on the patio drinking white wine, listening to jazz and crap. One day I go out on the porch to smoke a cigarette and I can see right down into his living room window. I can see the usual 2 glasses of white wine and faintly hear the usual jazz in the background. What was different was that he's getting absolutely pounded in the ass by this behemoth black guy. I guess he just had to have it all. Story 27. My neighbors from across the street are the worst TBH. This girl hosts hot parties that we can hear from across the street. One day we were coming home at around 10 p.m. She thought it was someone else parking in front of her house and came to the door completely naked. And we could see at least 3 of our neighbors were in there with her, along with some people we didn't know, and they did it like real pros. I suppose they saw their mom do it during her hot parties. Story 28. Definitely the guy that uses his large screen TV to doing himself good every night with his curtains wide open. His adult films interests are pretty bland. Just your standard movie start getting pounded by a dude whose face you never see. I'd have to actively try not to see this. That's how easy it is to see. Well, it's 10 p.m. Better not look out the window, because then we'll see neighbor man doing himself good. Story 29. When I was a teenager, a friend and I thought it would be hilarious to order pizza to the house across the street and watch the confusion unfold. The confusion was anticlimactic, as you can imagine, but the aftermath was crazy. We could see right into their living room, and the dad husband went ducking crazy and started screaming and throwing crap, and then started actually punching holes in the wall and ripping apart said wall once the hole was started. We didn't do the pizza thing again. Story 30. I live in NYC. In my first apartment, my guy bedroom window was right up against my neighbor's girl bedroom window. Our windows were 3 feet apart. Neither of us had blinds or curtains. We kind of just lived peacefully, ignoring each other, changing, watching Netflix, listening to music. We were both single, and on more than one occasion, we both had guests over at the same time. We only finally met, though, when we were both moving out on the same day. We got a drink together and laughed about all the shenanigans we had in front of each other. Never learned each other's names. Was the best neighbor I ever had. Story 31. Lived a rather small apartment building with a central courtyard and units all around. Facing into the courtyard were all the windows, including one that looked directly into the shower from waist to ceiling. So on the top floor at any given time, you could see into dozens of showers. Some people put up curtains, some put up slotted blinders that don't obstruct much of anything when looking down from above. Some who moved in took a while to notice before putting anything up. Some just went full-on wide open, including the college-age girls maybe 15 feet away. I had a corner unit. Pervy 20-year-old me saw so many boobies that first year and renewed my lease just for 12 months more in Titty Town. Story 32. NYC, high-rise office in Midtown, had an apartment building directly across from us, maybe 50 feet away of similar height. Every morning at 9 a.m. on the dot, this drop-dead gorgeous woman would take a shower, which had a window in it, and the blinds were wide open like 90% of the time. She knew what she was doing. That conference room was booked out months in advance, and we had a standing rule that you couldn't have reoccurring appointments at 9 a.m. for it. I'm pretty sure we made up expensive projects solely to snag it at times. Story 33. Went to college in a big city. Our freshman dorms were directly across the street from another university's freshman dorms. There was a hot girl who used to open her blinds, then take off her clothes, and do stuff naked all the time. She definitely liked the audience. She was hot girl. Another kind of chubby chick used to have sex in bed near her window all the time. She was sex girl. Halloween comes around and she's dressed like a milk wench, brings a dude home. So now she's sex wench. A few weeks later, sex wench brought a dude home, and after they're going at it for a few minutes, she's consoling him as he cries sitting up on the bed. Don't know what went wrong, but now she's mean sex wench. Some jeets in our school wrote in giant font on our side of the street, "Show us your boobs," and put it in their windows. Even naked girls started closing her blinds after that. Story 34. Straight up hideous, ugly, make you question your own sanity interior designs. Yeah, that sounds silly, but when I know your apartment is worth at least 2 miles and I can peer in and see that a drunk guy picked your furniture, I just don't get it. Nudity. Yeah, I forget about blinds all the time, ducking. Voyeurism ain't my thing, but I get it. Murder, sure, whatever. Crime of passion happens to the best of us, but spending that much on an apartment to decorate it so badly, straight up crazy. I will say the most upsetting thing I ever saw while living in a city that didn't involve peering through a window is a tie between seeing a homeless man masturbating in a phone booth on a busy street corner in the early afternoon near the East Village, while 24 people tried to avoid eye contact and stumbling upon a child who was alone and throwing up, while a man with one eye and an umbrella chased me near Penn Station and more at night. Story 35. I was hanging outside my apartment during a rainstorm. The balcony looked out over the complex's pool. All of a sudden, a girl pops up out of the pool, completely naked. She sees me and just walks off into the night. Story 36. My best friend used to live in a new development block of flats, and it consisted of 4 buildings in a square with a nice little landscape garden in the courtyard. One day we were playing some game. I think Halo 3, but that's not the point, and I could be wrong anyway. And he looked up and was like, "Those dudes opposite are having sex." We went over to his little balcony and, yep, that's two people having sex. There were stacks of crates, boxes, etc. in the room behind them, so we, correctly, assumed they were moving out and decided to put on a show on their last evening there. But it gets more ridiculous. They were joined after a short while by another man, at which point they moved out onto their own little balcony. By this stage, we'd just rolled up a couple of fat joints and taken some chairs outside. We just sat there and watched the three of them utterly railing each other for what seemed like hours. You could hear them from across the courtyard because they were seriously pouring it up. I assumed to attract as much attention as possible. More people came out to see what the fuss was about. Crows appeared to see what the fuss was about. Apparently, crows have a vocabulary of about 200 different sounds, and one of them is obviously, "Get a load of these dudes." At one point, we heard a laugh and looked over at the next door balcony, and some guy was sitting there watching too. He toasted us with his glass of wine, so we gestured to him with one of the J's. He nodded, so we gambled against the wind and threw it over to him. He caught it straight out of the air, even though it was lit, and proceeded to get caned by himself while giggling like a child. Before long, 24 balconies were full of people watching this going on. Eventually, they finished their, business, turned around, all three of them, joined hands, and took a ducking bow. The round of applause was thunderous. It was like being in a football crowd, except instead of a competitive match between two evenly matched teams, it was three people ducking like the asteroid had loomed into view and would be arriving within the hour, bringing the apocalypse with it. Then we all went back inside and did whatever it was we were doing before, which in our case was playing on the Xbox. And I assume jointly pondered why we had just spent so long watching three guys thundering each other like particularly dodoism. I thought about it for the rest of the week. On the tube home, I didn't read my book or listen to music. I just sat there and pensively considered events. My mate told me that in the morning, all the stuff was gone, and so were they. I salute those people because they could have blown their performance, as it were. They could have fluffed their lines, as it were, but they damn well saw it through to conclusion like seasoned champions. Three random dudes. May you find your way to gay Valhalla when the time eventually comes. You have earned it with aplomb. I'd send a Valkyrie, but really, based on your evident tastes, I think a few burly Vikings might be a more appropriate escort to the eternal hall of mead and bumming. Well done to you all. Story 37. Nothing. I'm so salty about this too. I deliberately moved to the city to see wacky stuff like this. Downtown Seattle and not a bare ass in sight in the many hundreds of windows I can see. Lots of boring people. Story 38. This is about as far away from the big city as you can get, but it was still weird as hell. So here we go. I was heading up north with my family to a cabin we would rent every summer. And as we passed through one of the little towns on the way, I looked up at a 2-story house. The second floor only had one window, but the curtains were pulled aside, and I could see a guy dancing in the window wearing nothing but a pair of tighty-whities. Had this huge brown afro and a beard? I didn't know who Bob Ross was at the time, but looking back, I'd say he looked like him. I saw a dude who looked like Bob Ross dancing in his underwear. Story 39. Funny thing is, I live in NYC now, but the craziest thing I saw through someone's window was in the suburbs. I grew up in the Hudson Valley, about an hour and a half north of the city. Typical suburb. Had the same next-door neighbor my entire childhood, the definition of a normal guy. So it was kind of weird that through his front door window, my family and I spotted a very large poster of a gray alien. It was positioned in such a way that it would essentially greet anyone the moment they walked in the house. Also worth mentioning that neighbor's son enlisted in the FBI. We know this because they came to ask us questions about him when doing a background check. It's not that strange. I get it, but for such a normal, average next-door neighbor, it was a weird little detail. Story 40. I used to live on the 24th floor of a skyrise condo building directly across the street from the W Hotel in Midtown Atlanta. I saw lots of crazy things. A Ferrari losing control and crashing into a row of parked luxury cars in front of the building, people having sex up against the windows, convention attendees who were way drunk running around in rainbow-colored leotards in the middle of the night, police chases that ended in the street directly below my building. But the wildest occurrence was in February 2015. At about 1 in the morning, and I was nestled into bed watching Game of Thrones, cuddling the cat and all around living the best life. This incident started with a very loud, "Damn you, punk-ass git!" followed by a few grumbling and escorts of people trying to calm someone down. Maybe a minute later, I hear, Come on then! Come on. Then, followed by lots of whoops and hollers and, oh, stop, stop, stop. I hopped up out of bed at this point and saw a group of about 10 people fighting in the horse escort driveway of the W. They fought for about 3 minutes before breaking into 3 groups who went in different directions. One group into the hotel parking lot, another back into the hotel, and the last group headed down the street towards Piedmont Park. The police showed up, lights and sirens wailing, and everything was calm for the rest of the night. The next day, I was out on my balcony smoking a cigarette, and the same group came outside and started brawling a second time. Same scenario. Police came, but this time someone was taken away in handcuffs. Come to find out later that it was Bobby Brown and his entourage fighting with family over Bobby Christina Brown, who had been found in a coma a few days before. Sad stuff. Story 41. Not a big city, small city. But we have 2 apartment buildings that face each other on the same property. It was a Super Bowl Sunday. I think the one from 3 seasons ago, which the Patriots had one again. Normally me and my lady would be at a Super Bowl party or hosting one, but we knew the Pats were going to win and weren't up to it this time around. Anyway, I look out the window through the curtain that was very transparent and noticed the unit straight across from us had people over. A bunch of Serbian dudes. They were all looking over towards us, touching each other's shoulders, pointing. That's when I tell my lady that we have an audience, as we were getting it on during the halftime show. She didn't care because she was out of view. It was just me stroking back and forth looking at them, looking at me, bunch of weirdos. Story 42. I had just moved into a garden apartment in the Lay area. Across the way was a small cluster of houses. The people who lived there seemed to all know each other. They would hang out on the porch together, blasting music, laughing, drinking, and smoking. I would watch them from my living room window. They were my age, 20-something. But I didn't know them and didn't feel confident introducing myself. Then one day they were all assembled on the porch, gathered around a bucket. They had built some kind of contraption and were laughing really loud. Clouds of smoke billowed up. I could smell it from inside my place. I had no idea what they were doing. After weeks of watching these weirdos, I decided this was as good a time as any to figure out what they were up to. I crossed the lot and introduced myself. Turns out they had built a massively huge gravity bong. I'd never seen one before. They offered, I accepted. I nearly choked from the massive column of smoke. They gave me beer, I gave them snacks. These people became my best friends. We had many adventures together over the next few years. The stuff of legend. I loved them. 30 years later, we still connect via FB. So if you have weird neighbors, I say go meet them. You might be surprised. Story 43. Los Angeles. When I was 14, I was walking with friends to a Little Caesars 4 blocks up my apartment to pick up a pie. On our way back, we hear moans, and we look up. And there's this dude getting plowed through his window by his partner. He was just halfway out the window, so you couldn't really see anything. But you can tell he was into it, and so was the guy who looked like a quarterback thrusting for the ball. We laughed it off and went about our business. Little Caesars was still really good 13 years ago. Story 44. Took a vacation to an adult-only private resort on a tropical beach. While the beach was beautiful, I had an amazing asterisk and huge private balcony overlooking the ocean, so I would go back to room around 4 every day. Order room service, shower, and then lay out on my balcony until sunset. Well, being that my room was on the highest floor, I was totally cool with tanning nude. Walking straight from the shower onto the balcony, but naked, is quite empowering. That is until dinner on the 3rd night, where I proceeded to walk into the restaurant and be greeted by a couple who extended a hand and introduced themselves. I say nice to meet you, to which they commented something along the lines of, well, everyone's met all of you already. Turns out the adjacent rooftop pool and club overlooks my balcony. I was called the European nudist for the rest of the trip. I'm American. Lesson learned. Story 45. Was walking back through one of the posh bits of Kensington in West London. Must have been about 10:30 p.m. on a Friday night. Walking down this long road with tall white houses on either side, lots of which have tall walls at the exterior of the plot and huge gates at the top of the drive. Anyway, I'm walking along and up ahead, see one of the double gates swinging open and a car preparing to drive out. As I pass, the driver, who was a genuine chauffeur, complete with a little cap, waves for me to cross in front of the car. A black sedan with what may have been blacked out windows, or perhaps it was just dark. I step across, turn to him, and wave my thanks. And as I do, inadvertently look through one of the massive downstairs windows of this property. In what looks like a library or drawing room are 15, 20 or so people dressed in black tie suits and evening gowns, wearing masquerade masks, all facing away from the window. Looking towards a woman who is also wearing a masquerade mask but is otherwise completely naked, who looks to be tied up against a tall backboard, or maybe just the wall, and who is surrounded by knife hilts sticking out of the backboard wall. No idea who lives there or what exactly I witnessed, but I'm guessing some sort of high-class hot party. I quickened my pace and got the hell out of there ASAP as soon as I saw it, though. And you bet I didn't look up as about 20 seconds after I passed the house, the black sedan drove slowly past me and on up the road. Story 46. I think the craziest thing I saw, even though we are a spread-out city so very car-necessary area, was Gary Coleman driving a beat-up old Honda waiting at a stoplight. This was probably about 20 years ago, but I can't get the weirdness of that out of my head. Story 47. Craziest was not much fun. It was a guy beating on his girlfriend when I was living in a low-income area. I called the cops immediately, and surprisingly, they turned up in record time. I guess because the family there also had a kid. No charges pressed, but the beatings stopped, or at least were done more quietly after that point. Best was probably two lesbians going at it one floor down. I was on one side of a corner on the courtyard, and they were on the other side of the courtyard, one floor down. The sounds from their open window were primal and guttural, and frankly, it was insanely hot when coupled with the dimly lit view. I think I only heard it because of the proximity of our apartment on the hot summer night. The next day, as I caught the elevator down to the first floor and they hopped on, as the doors closed, I said, "Just so you know, I'm in apartment and you two were loud enough to wake me up last night at 2:10 a.m. It's no biggie to me, but I thought you'd appreciate the heads up." Apparently, it did matter to them, as they turned bright red, thanked me, and I was never woken up again. Story 48. Nothing ever that weird, but living and working in and around NYC, there are definitely lots of naked people. My favorite was a neighbor I had when living in the suburbs. Hot MILF, whose kids were grown and out of the house, and her husband traveled a lot. A room off my bedroom looked across to a window that you could see into their bedroom from. When she was home alone, she'd get naked, changed in full view of that window sometimes. Sometimes she'd be naked for a while. I took to getting naked and walking around my room so she could see. Nothing ever came of it, but I like to think we each enjoyed the view. Story 49. In my first uni dorm, I walked past one of the rooms and caught a glimpse inside of what I thought was a guy lying on the floor. So I stopped to look, thinking he might be hurt. Nope, he was doing himself good. It was the weirdest position I've ever seen. It was like he was doing a crab walk, but instead he was lifting his arched back by propping it up with his head. It was like something from The Exorcism. Luckily, he didn't see me, and I just walked away as fast as I could. Story 50. I once looked out of my bedroom window to be greeted by the sight of matey next door by his window, standing bollock naked, happily shaving his balls. With his curtains open, Story 51, was walking through my living room naked and the screen door was open. Looked out it to see my neighbor doing the exact same thing. We both just sort of stopped for a second and shrugged and got clothes on. Good guy. We play D&D together now. Story 52. Just in walking by with my headphones on at night, I've seen dudes wearing balaclavas giving, receiving oral S. I believe their aim was to be seen. People joking. I believe they didn't know they could be seen. My neighbor would sunbathe naked a lot, even when there was no sun out. One dude was painting a pentagram on his wall, seen a couple nerdy-looking guys sword-fighting couples having sex. Seems to occur more often than I'd expect. But by far, the weirdest, most ducked-up crap I've seen is a man nailing a goat fake leg to his front door. He looked straight at me and said, "Good evening, sir," then continued with that crap like it wasn't out of a horror movie. I spoke up about it at work and got told it's some kind of voodoo thing, but I have no idea. Story 53. My husband was at a bar in Chicago that was directly across the street from a hotel. I think it was several floors up. He said he and his friend he was with sat by the window and noticed this couple having sex right in front of the window in one of the hotel rooms. It went on for close to 30 minutes. 30. They had no idea they were visible to the building across the street, apparently. He then decided it would be funny to send me a video of it. I was out with my mom and great aunt at the time, and I unfortunately watched it. They looked at me strangely and asked what I was looking at. I quickly put my phone away and said nothing. Honestly, the couple were super fit and really getting into it, so good for them, I guess. Story 54. I used to work in Soma in San Francisco on the 7th floor. There was a hotel across the street that you could see directly into if occupants didn't have their windows drawn. It was Halloween, and we were having a raucous work happy hour just as night had fallen. All of a sudden, scores of people are rushing toward the window and giggling. There's a fully lit room directly across the way. Curtains exhibitionist wide open. Dude facing us on the far side of a bed with a lady friend bent over the bed in front of him, pounding away. We're all waving frantically and laughing, and he ducking looks up, gets this huge smile across his face, and lets go of his mount to give us a two thumbs us. The lady has her face pressed into the bed and has noticed nothing amiss. He pauses. We see him give her a "wait a second" gesture and crosses the room to yank the curtains closed. She never saw her enthusiastic audience. He was an absolute legend about it. Story 55. Lived in a backpackers in Melbourne. Across the street at ground level next to a traffic stop was a tanning salon. The salon had automated shutters that were supposed to be activated, except this one day a woman went in and just started stripping off. She must have thought it was one-way glass. The cars honking and not moving at a green light told her otherwise. We were all at the window across the road in hysterics. Poor girl, I guess, but funny at the time. Story 56. Once saw the man who lived opposite me have his house raided by the police. Substances. He tried to escape via the roof. As these were terraced houses in London, it seemed his plan was to run along all the roofs of the neighboring houses. I'm not sure what his plan was after that, as these houses are 3 floors high with no fire escapes down the outside, but regardless, he got caught by police right after getting on the roof. Their solution to get him down was to call the fire brigade, who used their cherry picker to get him down. It was a slow and humiliating descent. As a side note, it was winter, and he was only in his underwear, and the nice Muslim family next door, who had about 5 kids, were all watching. Story 57. Big city guy here back in the day. I was high on a random Saturday afternoon. Decided to take a nap, woke up and saw the people across from me in another apartment going at it for like an hour. Sexy couple with some smooth moves. Good times. Another one was when I lived in NYC. One night I hear screaming and shouting. The kind of screaming that makes you immediately call the cops, like someone is definitely dying somewhere. I was about to make the call, and then I hear laughing in the same voices. Turns out they were rehearsing a death scene in a play. At least, that's what I tell myself to this day. Also, absolutely stunning woman across the alleyway dancing naked while she was getting ready for work. I was going to bed after an all-night binge, my younger years, was a nice way to end the evening. Saw a few BJs in random windows over the years as well. After living in NYC for a few years, nothing really phases me. Story 58. I lived in a not bad, but not good neighborhood in Des Moines. First home with my then wife and newborn son. Our neighbor's house burned down one night, and the house was rebuilt. He moved back in, and they had replaced most everything, except no curtains or blinds. He basically would just sit there smoking, geeking, and watching adult films. He would do this for literally hours, and he was right in front of a big picture window. Finally, one day I said something to him in passing like, "Hey man, not to tell you your business, but you may want to think about getting some curtains. Anyone could just walk by and see everything in your house." That's an open invitation to thieves. He never put up curtains. We sold the house about 2 months later. Story 59. Back in Bushwick, Brooklyn in like 1998 or so, I remember hearing moaning from my window, looked out and saw what looked like 2 people hugging closely in the apartment nearby. Nope, he had a knife inside of her stomach. I remember it looked like a weird, slow struggle of her faintly trying to resist and him just slowly turning the knife until she fell down. He then said, "Don't do that crap again, don't do that crap again. Why did you have to do that crap?" and left. I called the cops right when I saw it, and she survived. No idea what the whole story there was, but I just know she survived and was back there for another few years before moving out. Story 60. 6th floor in a ski resort. 2 parallel rows of condos with an open square roughly 100 feet wide between the 2 rows. Got in late. Our light's still off. I walk over and open the blinds to see the falling snow. There's a 5th floor condo across from us with lights on. One room has 2 boys playing a video game. In the other, there's a woman in a white bathrobe standing near the floor-to-ceiling window. Her hubby comes up behind her completely naked and doing the helicopter with his manliness. She does a little shimmy and drops her robe. Our blinds snap shut. My wife is standing next to me with the blind cord. "It's late. I'm tired, and you don't need any ideas." Sniff. Story 61. Not me, but a friend in Guatemala City once told me that as a hobby, he used to look at other tall buildings from his high-rise with binoculars. Weird, I know. Never really saw anything particularly shocking, but once apparently saw a well-dressed man with a briefcase enter a room at the Westin Camino Real, swanky-ass hotel, sit on the edge of the bed and open the briefcase, which was full of money. He proceeded to dump the contents all over himself and the bed and then make snow angels and roll around the succulent piles of cash money all over the bed. Story 62. I lived in a house across the road from an old factory that had been converted into flats. From my bedroom window, I could see directly into a first-floor apartment. It's not something I ever did consciously, but when it got dark, I'd go upstairs and close my curtains, but my eye would be drawn to the light coming from this particular flat. Everyone else was closing their curtains and getting the old smoochy evening lighting going, but this one guy, every night, like clockwork, he would switch on his big light, open his blinds, sit on a very uncomfortable-looking dining chair, and jack off while looking out at the row of houses opposite him. He knew I saw him. I moved house pretty soon after he started saying hello to me in the street. Story 63. I live in the suburbs, but there's a house right next door to us that has glass sliding doors leading from the master bedroom to the balcony. That house is a rental and had a high turnover rate. So far, I've seen every single female renter or roommate who had lived there since I moved into my house naked through those glass doors. My best guess is that because the balcony doesn't look out onto the street, they just assume none can see them. I know my wife had never changed with our curtains open, but our windows face the street. Story 64. Friend lived in a high-rise apartment building in Seattle. A bunch of us went out to smoke on the balcony and watched two people having sex in another high-rise about 6 blocks away. A total bucket list moment. Story 65. We live in an apartment in a downtown Seattle building that faces another sister building. Being right in the middle of everything on the 12th floor, I see at least some boobs and a random banana at a window bi-weekly. I can also see that a lot of miffers that don't like decorating and only sustain on bare essentials in relatively nice apartments. Throw in a ton of Overwatch matches from different apartments, and you have quite a view. Story 66. Sitting on workmate's porch at 2 a.m. and across the road, there's this young guy with his undies around his ankles shuffling along while his mates laugh and point. Cops put on sirens and they all run, but the shuffling guy doesn't pull up his pants but keeps shuffling. The cops follow him for 4 houses until they cut him off and he falls over trying to turn 5 the other way. Story 67. Not from a big city, but I once accidentally saw my brother and his girlfriend at the time doing the deed. He didn't close the curtains, and my small, innocent mind was walking by.